The Demon House, the Latoya Ammons case. A child was filmed walking backwards up a hospital wall, flipping over and landing on his feet. That was the moment a team of social workers and nurses stopped laughing at the Ammons family's claims and started calling in priests. In 2011, Latoya Ammons moved into a small rental home in Gary, Indiana, with her mother and 3 kids. From the start, things felt very wrong. Black flies swarmed their porch in the still of winter, shadows moved across the walls at night, then it escalated. Loud footsteps, disembodied voices, and strange oil-like substances dripping from blinds and doors. Her children began acting possessed. One son growled in a deep, unnatural voice and lifted off the ground floating. Another was taken to the hospital, and in front of social workers and doctors, he supposedly ran backwards up the wall to the ceiling. Multiple witnesses signed official reports saying they saw it themselves. The case caught the attention of the police, clergy, and media. Local police officers visited the house reporting strange voices on their recorders, malfunctions in their equipment, and even feelings of being watched. Priests were called to bless the house and later perform exorcisms on Latoya and her children. The home earned the nickname the 200 Demons House. Eventually, paranormal investigator Zach Bagans bought it, filmed a documentary inside, and later demolished it, claiming the energy was just too dark to leave standing. Why it baffled experts? Well, this wasn't just one family making wild claims. It was police captains, doctors, nurses, social workers writing sworn statements about things they couldn't explain. It became one of the most widely reported demonic possession cases in the US. There's a recent movie actually on Netflix called The Deliverance, which is about this case. It stars Glenn Close and Monique and that kid from Stranger Things, and they all actually gave their roles everything there was to give, so go watch it. It's very good. The possession of Clarita Villanovva. Now, 17-year-old Clarita was locked inside a Manila jail in 1953 when she suddenly started screaming in agony, clutching her arms and neck. Guards rushed in only to see fresh bite marks appearing on her skin as if teeth were sinking into her flesh. Though no one was touching her, Clarita claimed she was under attack by 2 demonic beings, one a large hairy man and the other with an angelic face but twisted evil features. They bit, scratched, and tormented her, forcing her to speak in perfect English, a language she didn't even know. Now, her attacks didn't happen in the shadows. They erupted in broad daylight during court hearings, in front of police, journalists, doctors, and government officials. Witnesses swore they saw her convulse, scream obscenities, and collapse as invisible fangs tore into her body. News of her possession spread worldwide, covered by newspapers and documented in books. American missionary Lester Smurl was eventually called in, and after a series of prayers and exorcisms, the attack ceased. Now, why experts were baffled with this one? Well, doctors couldn't explain the spontaneous bite marks or her sudden fluency in English. Skeptics tried to claim it was mass hysteria or self-inflicted wounds, but the number of witnesses and the violent nature of her fits, left them completely shaken. The Smurl haunting. Imagine living in a home for over a decade, but instead of memories of birthdays and holidays, your walls echo with violent attacks, growls, and shadowy figures. That was life for the Smurl family in Pennsylvania between 1974 and 1989. For years, the Smurls claimed their home was plagued by a violent demonic entity. Now, they reported being scratched, shoved, and slapped. Janet Smurl described being pinned down by an invisible force, while her husband Jack claimed he was attacked in bed. Their daughters said they were touched by cold, unseen hands. On one occasion, Janet said she woke up with a perfect fish-shaped bruise on her arm, though no one had struck her. They heard loud banging, smelled foul odors of rotting flesh, and saw apparitions of black masses that darted through hallways. Investigators were brought in, including well-known demonologists Ed and Lorraine Warren. Now, they claimed the Smurls were being attacked by a demon and that exorcisms were performed. The Catholic Church, however, was hesitant to fully endorse the case, leaving the family caught between science and faith. Now, their story was so public that it became a book and later a made-for-TV movie called The Haunted, and possibly you'll know the more popular film based on the story, The Conjuring series. Now, even after they moved, the family said the dark presence followed them. So why were experts so baffled in this one? Well, it wasn't just whispers. There were bruises, smells, and dozens of witnesses. Investigators documented strange recordings and cold spots, though skeptics suggested the family exaggerated for attention. To this day, no clear explanation actually exists. The Exorcism of Anneliese Michel. Now, this case is one of the darkest and most disturbing because the evidence still exists in uncut audio tapes. Now, in 1975, 23-year-old German student Anneliese Michel began showing signs of what her family believed was possession. She had been diagnosed with epilepsy, but her condition escalated beyond seizures. She refused food, ripped clothes off her body, destroyed religious objects, and claimed she was inhabited by multiple demons, including Lucifer, Cain, and Judas. Now, over the next 10 months, priests performed 67 exorcism rites, many of which were recorded on tape. On those tapes, Anneliese could be heard growling, screaming, and speaking in multiple voices at once. Her family claimed she ate insects, licked her own urine from the floor, and even bit the head off of a bird. By mid-1976, she refused all food and water. She grew skeletal, covered in bruises, and on July 1st, she passed away of malnutrition and dehydration. She was only 68 pounds at the time of her passing. Now, the case went to trial with the tapes played in court. Her parents and the priests were charged with negligent homicide for allowing her to basically starve. Yet to this day, many people who hear those tapes insist no medical condition could explain her voice or her behavior. So why are experts baffled with this case? Well, the uncut audio remains, again, some of the most disturbing so-called demonic evidence in existence. Psychologists cite schizophrenia and epilepsy, but believers argue the recordings sound like multiple beings speaking at once, something far beyond any mental disorder. The Louviers' possession, Madeleine Bavent, and the Haunted Covenant. Now, our final case takes us back to 17th century France, where one of the most infamous possessions unfolded in the town of Louviers. Nuns began convulsing, cursing, and screaming blasphemies during church services. They claimed to be tormented by a demon named unsee. Now, some said they were forced to attend satanic rituals, participate in black masses, and even perform grotesque acts with priests they accused of witchcraft. Now, one of the central figures, Madeleine Bavent, testified that she had been forced by priests into signing a pact with the devil. She claimed she saw visions of crucifixions, disembowelments, and monstrous entities inside the covenant. Now, the scandal exploded into public view. Exorcisms were performed before large crowds, with nuns kind of, writing on the floor, speaking in strange voices, and making claims of demonic marriages. Officials recorded the confessions and used them as evidence in witch trials. Though skeptics argued these possessions were mass hysteria combined with religious and political manipulation, the details remain deeply unsettling. The transcripts describe scenes that even modern horror movies would hesitate to show. So again, and lastly, why experts are baffled in this one? Well, it's because these were a handful of villagers in a dark corner. They were educated nuns, priests, and public officials in a structured religious environment. The convulsions, accusations, and so-called uncut confessions kind of became one of the best documented cases of mass demonic possession in history. These stories share a common thread: multiple witnesses, official reports, physical evidence, and recordings that still leave people unsettled and play rent-free in your minds. Whether you see them as mental illness, hysteria, or true encounters with evil, one thing is undeniable: the raw, uncut details have baffled experts for decades. And the question lingers: if even one of these cases, are real, what else could be lurking in the shadows, waiting to be caught on camera? Let me know your take on all of this. Thanks for watching. I'm your host, Ashley. I'll see you later. These creepy, abandoned theaters hiding evil secrets will either scare you into your nightmares or pique your curiosity enough to want to visit. Either way, get your popcorn ready for this one. The New Amsterdam Theater. This is the Ghost in Green. Now, she appeared in the still of the night, a woman in a shimmering green beaded gown gliding across the floor into darkness. Now, she was blowing a kiss and vanishing through a wall. That's what a night guard claimed he saw in the long abandoned New Amsterdam Theater located in New York City. Now, the New Amsterdam Theater opened in 1903 as a Broadway jewel, but by the 1980s, it lay in ruins. Now, mushrooms grew on the walls, water flooded the floors, and the once golden ceilings rotted away and rusted. During restoration, in the 1990s, when the theater was nothing but a decaying shell, workers and guards began to see her, a glamorous figure carrying a small blue bottle. Many believe this is Olive Thomas. First up, we have the infamous Dybbuk box. You might have heard of this story before, but for those who haven't, let me fill you in. As the story goes, a Dybbuk box appeared in 2003 when antique store owner Kevin Mannis bought a vintage wine box from a 103-year-old Holocaust survivor on eBay. After a strange string of unexplained hauntings, reoccurring nightmares, bruises, and smells of ammonia, the box found its way back onto eBay and landed in the hands of a man named Jason Haxton. Now, he too felt the wrath of the box and ended up burying it somewhere in Missouri, but not before pulling it out of the ground to appear appear on the television show Ghost Adventures. Haxton had paid $280 for the box, and when opened, contained a goblet, 2 locks of hair tied with string, pennies from the 1920s, a dried rosebud, a cast iron candlestick holder, and a granite statue engraved with Hebrew letters. Haxton said that he didn't believe the stories associated with the box and didn't have any worries when opening it. He heard strange noises though, moving objects, and unexplained events that will send chills down your spine. Well, at least it did mine. The cabinet was described as a wine cabinet to him. Jason reported that he would start hearing these strange noises coming from the cabinet, such as like knocking sounds and whispers. He also claimed to have seen very, shadowy figures lurking around the cabinet, and even reported feeling the presence in the room with him. As the strange occurrences continued, Jason began to research, the history of the cabinet. He discovered that it had once belonged to a Jewish family who had immigrated to the United States from Poland. The family had reportedly used the cabinet to store their belongings, but had also used it as a makeshift altar. Now, Jason became convinced that the cabinet was haunted, and according to the legend, a Dybbuk is a spirit that is created when a person passes in a state of great emotional turmoil, such as sadness or anger. The spirit is said to be trapped between the world of the living and the afterlife, and is often drawn to objects or places that hold a lot of sentimental value. As the occurrences continued, Jason decided to seek out the help of a rabbi who specialized in Jewish mysticism. Now, the rabbi performed a ritual to cleanse the cabinet of the Dybbuk, but it didn't work apparently. Jason eventually became so convinced that the cabinet was just way too haunted and decided to sell it. It definitely wouldn't have taken me that long. It would have been gone night one, but I guess he really loved the cabinet. However, despite trying to sell it, he soon discovered it wasn't easy to get rid of. Several people who had purchased the cabinet from him reported experiencing the same occurrences, including nightmares, noises, even physical attacks. Once Jason did get rid of it, it was actually purchased by another collector who then chose to remain anonymous. That collector reported experiencing strange things as well. Apparently, the two at one point had actually gotten together to discuss their experiences with the box and shared stories. And, he helped actually Jason track down the family that originally had the box. But what makes this story even more terrifying is that, again, these are real people. Jason wrote a book about it, which, went on to sell a lot of copies, and it is, of course, one of the most haunted books that exists. Today, the Dybbuk box is actually said to be in the possession of the anonymous collector, who has reportedly taken whatever steps necessary to just protect himself and his family from the evil spirit. However, the legend of the Dybbuk box continues to captivate people around the world. It may remain, convinced that it is indeed haunted, and Jason's story has been the subject of much debate and speculation. Now, there's also footage on YouTube, though, of a man named Joseph Mazzaferro opening a Dybbuk box at 3 a.m. It's frightening. I had my eyes half shut the whole time. You can hear something speaking back to him. I won't ruin it for you, but go look for it for yourself and let me know what you think. Next up, we have the NoEnd House story. This one's a bit more recent, and it's based on a very popular internet urban legend. The story goes that a man named Brian Russell explored an abandoned house with a strange layout where, each room seemed to shift and change. It's framed as a lengthy first-person account of, a trip through this really weird, twisted house. It's a haunted attraction that boosts a series of scarier and scarier rooms. But the twist, which isn't really a spoiler given that, the TV show uses it to cap off the first episode, is that the person telling the story might not have ever even left the house. The footage shows Brian navigating the house, but what starts as a curious exploration, quickly turns into a desperate fight for survival. But here's the thing, this footage is allegedly real, and Brian Russell is a real person. He's a filmmaker who actually created the footage as part of a project. But the way it's presented makes it seem like it's actual found footage. So there's a lot of speculation over that. And let me tell you, it is seriously unsettling. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, but wait, isn't found footage just a bunch of shaky cameras and fake scares? And to that I say, not always. Sometimes found footage can be genuinely terrifying, especially when it's based on real events. Next, we have the Phoenix Lights incident in 1997. Thousands of people in Phoenix, Arizona reported seeing a massive V-shaped UFO in the sky. The footage shows a strange strange glowing object hovering above the city, and it's genuinely chilling. But what makes this story even more fascinating is that the footage is real and it was captured by multiple people on different cameras. It's one of the most well-documented UFO sightings in history, and it's still unexplained to this very day. On March 13th, 1997, 2 formations of lights were sighted in the skies over the valley and other parts of Arizona. One was shaped like a V and cruised across the sky, while the other was a series of glowing orbs that appeared in a line near the Sierra Estrella mountain range. The 2 incidents became known just as the Phoenix Lights, one of the largest and best known UFO sightings in history. Now, thousands of people across Arizona witnessed this phenomenon, which caused, a kind of hullabaloo in the media over the next few months that grew into a worldwide obsession. Despite the public, searching for answers about what caused, the Phoenix Lights, both at the time and over, the ensuing decades, no official investigation has ever actually occurred. Several explanations were put forth to explain the mysterious lights, ranging from helicopters to camera lens flares. But of course, the favorite explanation was a spacecraft. Did we finally have good video proof that mankind is being visited by aliens? Well, who knows? Others ones weren't so sure though, and suggested that the bright lights resembled nighttime skydivers with flares. To some, this explanation seemed even more outlandish than, extraterrestrial, spacecrafts flying by to watch, a high school football game. I mean, what would skydivers be doing with flares in the night sky though? And if they were skydivers and had done this before, why wouldn't people have known about it or even recognized it? Was it, a prank or a hoax? As the story got more and more, publicity, a helicopter pilot for Fox Channel 10, actually, his name was Rick Krabs, he went on air and basically told what he knew, and apparently he knew a lot. Now, which of these stories freaked you out the most? Let me know your thoughts. Thank you for watching. I'm your host, Ashley. Until next time, stay scared. From haunted asylums to ghost towns and beaches, let's dive into these abandoned places filled with dark history and unexplained phenomena, and explore the reasons even the bravest experts might refuse to visit. First up, the Danvers State Hospital in Massachusetts. Now, this abandoned asylum was built in the 19th century and was notorious for its inhumane treatment of patients. The hospital was closed in 1992, but its dark history remains. Experts refused to enter the hospital due to reports of paranormal activity, including ghostly apparitions and unexplained noises. The Denver State Hospital, also known as the Colorado State Hospital, was a psychiatric hospital located in Colorado. Now, the hospital was established in 1890 and operated until its closure in 1974. It was actually built in 1874 and didn't open until 4 years later in 1878.
We're kicking things off with a movie that's so heinous, technically I shouldn't be talking about it. I can't even say the words that make up its title. We're gonna call it the people-eating mass extinction event of the 1930s. So this flick wasn't the director's first movie about people eating, but it was definitely the one that got the most flack from the media. His name is Ruggero Deodato, by the way. He'd been making films since the 1960s, and he had this trademark style. Flashy, grimy pictures with a hardened edge, and plenty of coitus and violence. He was one of many Italian directors who facilitated the people-eating boom of the late 1970s, and he'd already made a film about it, The Last C-Word World, before he got around to this one. So this movie is the story of a professor journeying to the Amazon to discover what happened to a film crew of missing brave young Americans, only to realize that this characterization couldn't have been further from the truth. From the get-go, the movie looks at how the mass media portrays its fellow Americans, the marginalization of those outside the land of the free, and what it means to be civilized. The young filmmakers are immediately positioned by the media as victims of local savagery, and when anthropologist Dr. Monroe is said to find them, it is only through his embracing of culture that he comes across the lost film reels that's gonna piece all of this together. Broadcasting executives back in New York are foaming at the mouth at the prospect of a new documentary. Even more sensational, let's give it to me. Well, these filmmakers are so focused on sensation and viewing figures that the sizzle reel that they show include, well, just a couple of little antics. Oh, what? Well, let's see. Forcible amputation. Why? Well, somebody got a snake bite and something had to go. Now, there isn't a lot more I can talk about in detail when it comes to the plot of this one for safety reasons, as is the case with a lot of old school exploitation flicks. Everything was seized on the grounds of obscene stuff. But then something crazy happened. By the way, this is real world stuff. All of this became evidence in criminal proceedings. This wasn't just a plain old too devious for public consumption theatrical release. People thought this was a snuff film, and apparently the weirdos who made it were so brazen that we're gonna throw a premiere for it. The director was brought up on killing charges, and he was forced to bring his actors in for interviews to be like, look, they're alive, they're just good actors. So then he had to demonstrate how they did a lot of the special effects in the movie. Thankfully, eventually all the charges were dismissed, but whew. The courts eventually overturned the movie's ban several years afterwards. But by this point, the director and a lot of his associates had a lot of legal troubles, and everybody was like, we can't show this. Also, they were really censoring it. By the way, before I move on, the film isn't without its faults. Although 6 animal deaths appear on screen, 7 animals sadly lost their lives for the production, because there's the scene where the monkey dies. It was done twice. So I'm not saying it's ethically great, but yeah. Before the shot-for-shot American remake called Quarantine, Rec was a claustrophobic Spanish found footage effort that brought a fresh dose of claustrophobia and terror to the zombie genre. A TV reporter and her cameraman are conducting a routine interview at a local fire station when an emergency call comes in. Accompanying the firefighters to a nearby apartment, the news team begins recording the crazy screams coming from inside an elderly woman's unit. After authorities seal off the building to contain the threat, the news crew, firefighters, and residents are stuck facing a lethal terror inside. With the camera running, survival for everybody involved seems kind of unlikely. So Rec is quite unsettling as it moves at a restless clip, using the found footage device to inject a new kind of immediacy to the zombie concept, which is kind of funny because normally zombies are quite slow. The plot is simple enough, and the cast is populated by stock characters, but the film overcomes the shackles of its tropes with pure energy and, well, how it did things, including the absence of any music on the soundtrack until the end of it. So it often really does feel like you're watching a horrific documentary, one that continues with the same breathless momentum in the sequel. And as the unpredictability of the scares goes from one act to the next, it's kind of hard to watch without some lights on. Looking to cash in on the success of films like Paranormal Activity and The Last Exorcism, The Devil Inside tries its best to be something that is, well, doomed to fail. The film desperately wants to have that same creepiness and, all the stuff that made its predecessor so great. But unfortunately for director William Brent Bell, The Devil Inside squanders what could have been a pretty good movie, opting instead to rely on found footage trends in a bad way, and also a horrible, pretentious ending. So this movie revolves around a woman named Isabella Rossi. She travels to Italy to investigate her mother's involvement in a series of exorcisms gone wrong. Along with a documentary filmmaker, they visit a mental institution to meet with her mom. Now, this film was kind of, well, it was the worst movie of 2012. And it's very, very bad, and not bad in a good way. It's the kind of bad that gives bad a bad name. Lingering only on one screen in just one movie theater 5 weeks after its release. Look, the people filming this must have been like, oh, we can fix this in post. Yet, turns out they can't. No retroactive intervention would infuse a single frame of it with the merest little bit of terror that was promised in the ad campaign. And because of this, the producers were kind of forced to rely on an entirely, well, it was just a cop-out. And it ended the film with a link to a website at which further information on the case in the movie can be found. Sure, on the surface, the premise is actually somewhat intriguing. The Italian backdrop seems like a cool locale for a movie like this. We all know, Italian films tend to really go for it. And the prospect of unsanctioned exorcisms is also nice twist on the genre, good trope, and there are a few interesting character-driven subplots that really could have taken the story to another level. But here's the problem. None of these things ever reach a sound conclusion. But on top of that, the writing and acting, it's not really it. Grandma and Helmuth are kinda bad, making the already too serious tone seem all the more ridiculous. And even some of the really good acting is just really wasted on some brutal dialogue that's only really reserved for student films. This is only amplified when the characters speak directly into the camera as they launch into massive streams of exposition and pointless narration. The R-rated language also seems really forced and unnecessary, especially when the demons cast out taunts at Isabella and the priests. It seemed like somebody just learned a bunch of bad words and they're like, we're gonna say it all right now. VHS was one of the most exciting horror anthologies in recent years, and it managed to find a newer spin on the found footage genre by giving a bunch of emerging filmmaking talent the opportunity to explore the approach in their own unique ways. It contains contributions from some of the more ambitious micro-budget American filmmakers working today, which none of them also exclusively work in horror. The concept's parameters were kind of simple. They were developed by Brad Miska, founder of the horror fan site BLOOTY Disgusting. A group of young hooligans are tasked with stealing a mysterious tape from an ominous home. When they come across a heap of unidentified tapes, well, then we've got the framing device begins, as each cassette contains another morbid encounter. What happens? Well, the resulting experience is their own private horror festival, with shorts by known indie filmmakers David Bruckner, Glenn McQuaid, Joe Swanberg, T. West, and the online filmmaking collective known as Radio Silence. Now, despite the chorus of indie names involved in its production, VHS maintains a surprisingly fluid structure. The lo-fi video quality and overwhelming atmosphere carry over into into each chapter. Most segments have a fair share of cheap scares, but they also delve into the art of the build-up, delivering a series of grim jokes with some really great punchlines. It works to a large degree because it asks for original lo-fi stories from filmmakers who already excelled at doing just that, and it's a total blast to see them all working together in ghoulish harmony. The equally delightful sequel, by the way, proved this approach wasn't an anomaly, but we want more. And finally for today, Stephen Cognetti's House LLC. Yeah, it might not have much to distinguish it from other found footage films in terms of setup, but it was so good. So what's the premise? Well, there's this documentary crew investigating a haunted house that's been closed for about 15 years, only for the ghosts of the past to haunt them and leave everybody dead. Oh, spoiler. With such a bare-bones setup, it doesn't have a lot to work with, but it does so well at a high level. The director excels at building out a demented specific landscape for his cast to run around in, and delivers genuinely terrifying terrors to match. Some aspects work, some don't, but you get some sequels. I think it's a great example of modern day horror at its finest. There's some pretty decent scares. The props the group uses, by the way, in particular the mannequins with the masks, pretty scary. The limited view of Paul's camcorder makes for some unsettling moments, even though there's a couple of times where it's like, dude, just put down the camera and help your friends or run away. But it works. Oh, before I forget, by the way, if you're afraid of clowns, maybe tread lightly with this one. And hey, even if you aren't, I like clowns, you might be when the film ends. Yvonne Hides is an events manager for the Scottish Ghost Company and has organized paranormal investigations across the country. And during one such event at Proven Hall, she received an old-looking doll from one of the members. After taking it home and placing it in her spare room, a number of strange incidents occurred on the property. So we do have some video footage today of the absolute chaos that was happening in Yvonne's house. The bizarre series of paranormal activity culminated in an investigation in a park where Yvonne is adamant she saw the creepy doll blink. She told Glasgow Live one of the members' friends had brought the doll to him after being on holiday in the north of England. They bought it from some charity shop. And she tends to be the recipient of a lot of weird things. Most of the dolls she has in her possession are all hand-me-downs, and they don't bother her. But that night, with that doll, it was making her feel uncomfortable. So she had mentioned her friend David, who works as a medium, absolutely hates this doll. When our lovely witness brought it home, he was like, I'm gonna keep that in the garage. And that made her a little worried. Suddenly, the Cocker Spaniel in the house took a dislike to the doll being in the room. Started barking and shaking. And if you know, animals tend to be the most susceptible to weird spirits. One day our witness came downstairs and saw one of her really heavy lamps sitting in the middle of the living room. Her son came in and was like, hey, are we moving stuff around? Nope. More objects were being moved around each morning and weird electrical things started to happen. Turns out they have an electrical vacuum that is programmed to come out at 10:30 each night. Well, she was turning off the lights one morning and it went out and did its own thing. So she looked on the website and it hadn't been registered as being active at the time. So when David took his turn bringing the doll home throughout the night, he also reported knocking and footsteps that just didn't make sense. So the Scottish Ghost Company took this doll to a park to investigate it. They did a little live stream on TikTok, on Facebook, they tied a red light around the doll's neck with hopes of allowing the spirit to transfigure its face onto the doll. Well, during the process, Yvonne and a few others on the live stream were like, yeah, that doll blinked. So it was then up to the team if they wanted to bury it or keep it. They decided to keep it, so I'm sure I'll do an updated video in a year and it's gonna be everything awful. A spooked man believes his flat is haunted after he filmed a lot of objects moving by themselves. So this bizarre video, which was captured at the man's home in Fayetteville in North Carolina, shows a number of items that are just throwing themselves off a kitchen counter. So the video was posted on Reddit, and a lot of folks were like, okay, maybe there was a piece of string, maybe we were just doing some really great magic. And I was also kind of skeptical. But then I saw everything moving. The papers were fluttering, and I was gonna be like, okay, fraud with a fan. But then the toaster went flying, and I was like, yeah, nope, that's legit. So the unnamed filmmaker who posted the video said that they came home to a couple of things out of place and decided to review the footage, and it scared the hell out of them, which valid. Apparently they're like, yeah, maybe I was being paranoid, but they could feel something or someone looking at them. And they were seriously considering breaking their lease to move. So I checked the comments on the original Reddit post, and the man claimed there was a couple of things that happened in the bathroom and the living room. Thankfully nothing in the bedroom, primarily just the kitchen. And he's like, yeah, I've lived here close to a year. This started 2 months ago. Now, granted, as of the time of me telling you this was 7 years ago, and the original post was deleted, so I don't have an update, but I'm hoping the guy did break his lease and got the heck out of there. Ever balance on a chair so stupidly that when it eventually tips, you blame the chair instead of your own stupidity? Well, today we have video of a chair doing a whoopsie without any human involvement. The owners of Cronies, a bar and restaurant in Ventura County in California, already lost their words after a surveillance video from the restaurant shows a bar stool falling over on its own, with nobody around. So for this to happen, it's pretty creepy, said the co-owner Dave Folds. He's like, it's just really weird. We've been here 27 years and nothing like this has ever happened. Now, the owner was like, this is not a Halloween stunt. I'm confused. I don't know what's going on. Customers don't seem to be frightened by the potential haunting. They're like, oh, it's funny. It's interesting. Saying like, I'm okay until it's my chair that moves. Another customer was like, so many people come and go. Maybe this place is haunted. I got a feeling. So according to the co-owner, there's a lot of good spirits there. They were referring to like the photos that cover the walls of the restaurant. There's like customers, there's employees, everybody. But apparently the co-owner does have an idea of who might be responsible. Apparently Ralph and Dawn, the first originals of the restaurant, introducing the co-owner to his wife, passed like 20 years prior. And whenever something weird happens, they blame it on them. Which like, not smart, but okay, good luck. Sean Robinson ended up in possession of a petrifying painting more than 20 years ago after his beloved grandmother passed away. But this isn't something you might want to hold in your home. It had been kept hidden away by his grandmother while she was alive because she didn't like to look at it because it was unnerving. And when you look at it, you'll understand why. Now, he's aware skeptics are like, okay, maybe his grandma just wanted to scare and tease him. But he's like, no, what I was told about the anguished man was the truth. Footage shared on his YouTube channel shows how a door suddenly slammed shut without human intervention, which was kind of the first red flag for Sean that maybe something was wrong. He's like, I've witnessed a lot. Noises are the first thing, and at first he didn't relate them to the painting. But it became obvious that they only started when the painting got brought into the house. Sean used to wake up in the middle of the night and see a figure at the end of his bed. He'd have dreams about the painting. Heck, he had a vivid one where he was being lifted off the bed, alien style. As well as alleging to have seen the figure of a man, just like his grandma used to claim she did, Sean says he heard crying, he heard moaning noises. Once he was even surrounded by thick smoke while the temperature plummeted. All signs of demonic activity. Sean said there was no denying it. It was there, and then it just vanished. And most of the activity seems to happen between 3 and 4 a.m. The witching hour. And finally for today, a husband and wife believe their Raggedy Ann doll is possessed after a series of terrifying events. So when Lindsay and Lee's doll first arrived in their museum of haunted objects, Lindsay and one of her close friends got a mysterious illness and narrowly avoided not 1, but 2 car crashes. Lindsay was like, yeah, I just got really ill, like I was in the hospital for a week, and the doctors to this day still don't know what was wrong. One of our good friends also became very ill, he got abscesses in his mouth, all sorts of things. So in the first car crash, a white van nearly went into the side of Lindsay's car and she had to go off the road. And in the other, she was on a roundabout. She was like almost pulling out and another car like almost crashed right into her. On the 2-year anniversary of the couple owning the doll, October 21st, they're like, yeah, the doll's causing chaos again. Their heavy Ouija table was hurled over, which was caught on camera. So after this, they decided to put the doll in a glass cupboard on a secure hook. They were like, maybe that'll stop everything. Well, Halloween 2022, 3 a.m., their camera footage showed it stepping out of the display cabinet, legs first, which like, rag dolls can't do that. They don't have like Barbie limbs. They normally just go head first, which, nope. And also a Ouija table? You're tempting fate. What better place to start today's list than an old abbey? Specifically, Roche Abbey is a now-ruined abbey in the civil parish of Maltby, Rotherham, South Yorkshire, England. If I mispronounced any of that, I apologize, I tried. It is in the valley of Maltby Beck and is administered by English Heritage. It's also listed in the National Register of Historic Parks and Gardens. The abbey was founded in 1147 when the stone buildings were raised on the north side of the beck. The co-founders of Roche were Richard de Buzzley, likely the great-nephew of the first Roger de Buzzley, the Norman magnate builder of Tickhill Castle, and Richard Fitzturgis. When the monks first arrived in South Yorkshire from Newminster Abbey in Northumberland, they chose the most suitable side of the stream that runs through the valley to build their new Cistercian monastery. 25 years later, at the end of the century, the Norman Gothic Great Church, dedicated to the Virgin Mary, had been finished, as well as most of the other buildings. The control of the abbeys was vested in the de Vesci family, lords of Rotherham, who in turn subfeuded the land to Richard Fitzturgis, Lord of Wickersley. From the start, the Abbey of Roche, built for the so-called white monks, as the Cistercians were known, had an almost otherworldly air. It was, after all, built at the northern end of an area once owned by Sherwood Forest, and it was said that Robin Hood went to mass here. At its height, it supported a community of around 175 men, of whom around 60 were choir monks, and the remainder being lay brothers. A Cistercian innovation. Eventually, on the death of the co-founder Fitzturgis, control of the abbey passed to his son Roger, now D. Wickersley, and then eventually to a granddaughter, Constantia, who married William de Levitt, a family of Norman origin who were the lords of the nearby village of Houghton Levitt. The abbey continued in the Levitt family until 1377, when John Levitt sold his rights in the abbey to the London merchant Richard Barry. By the time of the dissolution, full control of Roche Abbey was held by Henry Clifford, 2nd Earl of Cumberland, who came in for numerous grants at the dissolution, as he was married to the niece of King Henry VIII. Back in 2021, members of the Conisbrough Paranormal Research Association were adamant that they had spotted a spooky monk at the old abbey. Dean, age 38, from Conisbrough, said that they had been up there taking photos, and the most interesting one was near the first gatehouse. They had found that one of the pictures, which had showed a monk from the chest up, with an orb, like a ball of energy, and the photo showed the outline of his head and a hood. Now, they were still going through the photographs at the time of the articles, because they took up to 1,000, but they were pretty sure it was a monk that would have lived there in the 12th century, when it was still an abbey. So the footage we have today was from the Haunted Finders channel here on YouTube, where a group of investigators had their equipment pick up a lot of spirits still kicking around on the grounds. Time to move over to Ness Church for a little change of pace, and maybe I won't bungle up as many words. Eerily surrounded by gigantic fields, this church is so rural that Google Street View didn't even have documentation of it by 2019. Hell, as of the time of my recording of this, they still don't have a Street View option. There are other roads nearby that have been covered, but nowhere near the church. Like, we got like here, the church is over here, none of this. If that isn't ominous enough, I don't know what is. Originally organized as the Norwegian Evangelical St. Johan's Congregation of Meeker and surrounding counties in 1861, Ness Church, located in Litchfield, Minnesota, is said to be one of the most haunted locations in the state. This tiny country church is said to be haunted by the spirits of settlers killed during the Sioux uprising of the 1860s. In the nearby town of Acton, a handful of young locals shot and killed 5 settlers, including a woman and her daughter, and all 5 are buried there. The incident sparked a violent conflict that ended with a mass execution of 38 Dakota residents in Mankato, a dark chapter in Minnesota's history. Some folks have reported the lights of the church come on by themselves and apparitions spotted on the premises. Avid ghost hunters frequent the grounds, and back in 2015, there was actually an instance of 4 people breaking into the church and being charged with felony burglary and criminal damage to property. Church officials tried to curb the trespassing and unwanted break-ins by offering guided tours. The video in question today seems to show an apparition caught on camera. You let me know what you think in the comments. Back to Abbeys we go, with Kirkstall Abbey next up on the docket. The picturesque ruins have been drawn and painted by artists such as J.M.W. Turner, Thomas Girton, and John Sell Cotman. Kirkstall Abbey was acquired by the Leeds Corporation as a gift from Colonel North and opened to the public in the late 19th century. The gatehouse became a museum, which is now part of the Leeds Museums and Galleries group. The English houses, of which there are remains at Fountains, Rievaulx, Kirkstall, Tintern, and Netley, were mainly arranged after the same plan, with slight local variations. Situated just outside of Leeds, Kirkstall Abbey still stands to its full height and for centuries offered a peaceful existence for the monks who lived and worked there. However, daily life could be harsh, and like any community, it was not immune to intrigue and mystery as religion developed. With over 800 years of history, this abbey attracts many visitors and is considered one of the oldest attractions in the region. During the dissolution of the monasteries under King Henry VIII, this abbey was emptied and its remains were left behind. Now, after that dissolution, sightings of ghosts have become common, and by the 19th century there were reports of ghostly apparitions in the nave of the church. One witness claimed to have seen a funeral procession of somber men, clad in white, proceeding slowly. Now, the abbey is also famous for its repeated haunting manifestation of a former abbot that walks around the building that has now been converted to the Abbey House Museum, although you're more likely to hear him moving around than you are to see him. Some also believe that there is a mad monk who haunts the abbey after his brother was killed by highwaymen on his way back from the Fountains Abbey, which is another abbey in Yorkshire. Mad with guilt and despair, he began carving his brother's initials into the abbey grounds that can apparently still be seen in small bench nooks around the ruins even now, and he continues to walk around the abbey to this day. The grounds are also home to a young female entity called Mary, who witnessed her lover ending the life of another and then turned him in. She has often been seen with the ghost of a dog, but we're not sure if they're connected or not. The footage we have today, by the way, is another stellar example of spirit communication tech at work. I've used some of those things before myself. They are quite reliable and pretty freaky. Okie dokie, internet sleuths, I need your help with this next video. In my opinion, it's an internet legend that's been kicking around since 2007. Heck, I remember the first time I watched it on my little iPod under my High School Musical comforter, terrified. I was up too late, and when my brain saw something like this, well, I was already in the dark. Well, let's just say it sent my mind racing. I'm the kind of gal who needs to have all the doors closed in a room or I cannot sleep. It is not happening. Heck, I was recently in an area that was affected by a weird power outage, and I think I lasted like an hour in the darkness with my 20 candles before I went to a home with power because I couldn't stand being alone with my thoughts, and yeah, nope. Not it. Sorry, back to the video I go. This one depicts David Hole and Jake Garrison, who allege that they stumbled upon an abandoned chapel in the woods and decided to do some sleuthing. As one does. How very Scooby-Doo of you. And the duo encountered a spirit playing the piano while they did. And very well, if I say so myself. Fun fact about me, folks, I took Royal Conservatory piano testing when I was younger, so I have an idea of what I'm talking about. I used to have to sight read. Other than that, I have no idea where the funeral channel guys are located, so let me know in the comments what you know. Okie dokie, everybody. We're gonna end today with an exorcism filmed through a peephole. So it's no secret that exorcisms are still a practice done today, but the Catholic Church really likes pretending that they don't because of the negativity and stigma around it. Technically speaking, the Catholic Church authorizes the use of exorcism for those who are believed to be the victims of demonic possession. Specifically, in Roman Catholicism, exorcism is a sacramental but not a sacrament, unlike baptism, confirmation, or confession. So unlike a sacrament, exorcism's efficiency depends on two elements: authorization from valid and legitimate church authorities, and the faith of the exorcist. The church will ask publicly, and in a position of authority, in the name of Jesus Christ, that a person or object be protected against the power of the evil one and withdrawn from his dominion. Now, the rite of exorcism was revised in January of 1999 and assumes that possessed persons retain their free will, though the demon may hold control over their physical body and involves prayers, blessings, and invocations with the use of the document of exorcisms and certain supplications. Typically, the individual will be restrained, and the priest will perform a ritual of prayers to remove the evil spirits. Solemn exorcisms, according to the canon law of the church, can be exercised only by an ordained priest or higher, with the express permission of the local bishop, and only after a careful medical examination to exclude the possibility of mental illness. The Catholic Church has between 500 to 600 official exorcists, by the way, with the vast majority operating in Latin America and Eastern Europe. Now that we're all clear on the formal definition of exorcisms, let's dive into this lovely video from 2014. The ritual was captured on camera by a man who heard the shrieks of a woman inside the sanctuary and filmed it through a peephole. The incident occurred at the Assumption of the Virgin Mary Church in Vranow nad Digi in February of 2014, and the church priest, Marek Dunda, confirmed the video is real, but mentioned that if something's filmed through a keyhole, he's not going to say anything about it, which, that's a dodging the question kind of answer if I've ever heard one. And trust me, I'm the daughter of a politician. He told the newspaper he carries a mandate from his bishop to perform exorcisms. He said that the group was asking God to protect and to liberate the person that was suffering, which included using a Latin prayer asking for help, and of course it helps. Look, I'm no expert on exorcism rituals, yet. But if you have to state that of course something helps, in my personal opinion, I'm a little skeptical. It's kind of hard to tell what's happening in the video, but it appears that at least two people surround the woman, who can be heard screaming in agony with momentary pauses in between for the duration of the just under 2-minute long video. Daniel Chokta, who shot the video after hearing the screams, warns people in the description to watch the chilling footage while wearing headphones. When asked about the condition of the woman in the video, the priest said any details about her or her state were private. And while I'm glad the church is respecting her privacy, I just hope the poor woman has been cured and healed. As much as I joke about it and I make light of it, demonic possession is no pleasant or laughing matter.
We begin with the Blair Witch Project.
We're doing a documentary about the Blair Witch. Oh, have you heard of the Blair Witch?
Oh yeah, that's an old story.
We can't kick off a found footage horror movie without including the one that started it all. Released in 1999, the Blair Witch Project utilized found footage so effectively that people truly believed what they were seeing was really documentary footage. The movie follows 3 students, Heather, Michael, and Joshua, who hike into a Maryland forest in 1994 to film a documentary about the Blair Witch, a myth that has supposedly terrified locals for years. However, over the course of the 81-minute Fright Fest, strange things begin to happen, whether it be finding stick figures outside their tents or their belongings rifled through, or even one of them missing in the dead of night. The friends film their relentless ordeals in the woods, and we experience anguish alongside them as their one source of safety is removed from them, their map. They are well and truly lost, and Joshua is missing, somewhere in the woods. Is it the Blair Witch, or something even darker and more sinister? I have to say, the first time I watched the Blair Witch Project, I was paralyzed in fear at the final frame of the movie. For a movie with such a small budget and only 3 characters for the majority of the film, it is so effective at delivering horrors and making you feel just as trapped as the 3 students. For any horror movie lover, this should always be a first on your list, and if you haven't seen it yet, I am very disappointed. Before we continue, let me know below what your favorite found footage horror movie is, and maybe give this video a like once you're down there. Next up, we have The Visit. Here I come. While most are 50-50 about M. Night Shyamalan and his delivery of effective twists and turns, this man does have my heart, and I will argue that The Visit is one of the most horrifying movies to date. This 2015 horror movie follows siblings Becca and Tyler, who are visiting their grandparents on their farm for the first time. Like all horrors, things begin normal at first, but soon descend into madness and chaos as the grandparents start acting very, very strangely. Determined to figure out what is going on, Becca and Tyler try to unravel the mystery by recording the strange events, some of which include the grandmother projectile vomiting, screaming into the camera and chasing the siblings under the foundation of the house in one of the most chilling and heart-racing scenes in the entire movie. The Visit feels like there is reality behind it. How many of us haven't met our relatives? And if you did, you would trust them, right? They're family after all. The Visit feels a little too real with how it documents these kids meeting their grandparents for the first time, and the sinking feeling they feel when things begin to grow increasingly more sinister while being trapped on a farm with essentially strangers. Can you trust them? As M. Night Shyamalan loves to do, there are of course countless twists and turns to float your boat, and this movie doesn't neglect that, with it having perhaps one of my favorite twists in a found footage horror movie. The Visit successfully reinvents a saturated subgenre so effectively it feels like it was being done for the very first time. If you haven't yet watched it, you absolutely should, and if you didn't like it, you're wrong. Moving on, we have As Above, So Below.
Abandon all hope, ye who enter here.
In my opinion, this is the most underrated movie on our entire list. When I discuss my love for this movie, I'm either met with disgust or people being confused about what the hell I'm talking about. This managed to fly under the radar, but for those who haven't seen it, it's a love or hate kind of movie. Released in 2014, this found footage horror gem takes place in the Paris catacombs, which is utterly terrifying. It follows a documentary crew as they explore the catacombs in hopes of finding the Philosopher's Stone, a legendary substance discovered by Nicholas Flamel, which is said to grant immortality and turn metals into gold. Not bad. This all may sound familiar to you if you have seen the first Harry Potter movie, but trust me when I say this movie is wildly different. The movie in essence is based on the 9 circles of hell from the poem Divine Comedy. The film primarily focused on Scarlet Marlowe, a sort of knockoff Lara Croft, but in a good way, follows her deceased father's clues as she delves deeper into the catacombs, following unmarked routes and facing challenges and terrifying occurrences. The remains of the lost aren't the only thing haunting the team, but also their own personal demons that they must conquer in order to escape. The real horrors of this movie lies in reality as we witness the characters work their way through their own inner demons and become absolved, and in some cases found guilty of their sins. As Above, So Below is a mind-bending horror because you're never quite sure what you're witnessing is real or fake. Did a man just get sucked into a burning car in the depths of the catacombs? And are people in fact performing a satanic ritual? Or is this all in the minds of the characters who are slowly losing their way? It is a movie that's so incredibly smart and often flies right over people's heads. It explores themes of greed and obsession as well as touching on spiritual motifs. Sometimes you have to wonder if chasing something forbidden is worth the cost, because the cost just might be your life in As Above, So Below. Up next we have VHS.
Which one is it?
I don't know, man. Let's just
Look at these, okay?
The VHS series as a whole is excellent, particularly 1 and 2, but in this instance I'm going to strictly be discussing the first movie in the series. Released in 2012, VHS is an anthology found footage horror and is compiled of a series of interconnected shorts written by various horror directors including Adam Wingard, Ty West and David Bruckner. The connecting story follows a group of criminals hired to break into a home. However, inside they discover a collection of VHS tapes, all containing something terrifying and disturbing. From a From a group of friends on a paranormal investigation encountering a demon to a man with a camera recording a supernatural force, the contents of these tapes are truly horrifying. However, the standout story in the movie has to be Amateur Night, directed by David Bruckner. The segment follows 3 friends who rent out a motel room and intend on bringing a woman back to record their exploits. However, things don't turn out the way they intend for the best, as the woman they select might not be human at all. Without spoiling too much, the climax of this short is truly terrifying, also unbelievably rewarding for those who weren't rooting for the 3 friends, aka me. Combining found footage with anthology is a big feat, and VHS does it incredibly well. Finally, we have Wreck. This is not only one of my favorite found footage horror movies, but one of my favorite horror movies, period. Now, this movie should not be confused with its American counterpart, Quarantine. I understand wanting to bring this movie to a broader audience, but I will always push for people to watch the original Spanish version, as it is far superior and terrifying, in my opinion anyway. Released in 2007, this Spanish found footage horror, Wreck, short for record, tells the story of a reporter and her cameraman, who are documenting and following firefighters. While things begin as normal, the firefighters soon get a call to an apartment building where a woman is trapped in her apartment. However, something sinister is happening inside. The woman displays aggression and begins to attack the firefighters, unbeknownst to them, spreading a terrifying infection that sweeps its way throughout the building, and no one is safe. Thankfully, we have the cameraman recording everything for our entertainment. The building is ultimately placed in a lockdown with no one coming in or out, with the reporter trapped inside documenting the entire thing. However, the infection isn't the only thing being housed inside the building. Something is inside the penthouse suite, and whether she wants to or not, our reporter is about to uncover the truth in the dark confines of the apartment. The final few moments of this movie are some of the most unsettling and chilling moments in any horror movie. The visual effects are unbelievably impressive for the budget, and the acting is truly superior. Will the reporter be able to uncover the truth of what is going on, and more importantly, will she escape the infection zone? What makes this movie feels so real and authentic is that it follows everyday life and forces you to doubt whether you are safe inside of your apartment building. Do you know your neighbor? Maybe you haven't seen them in a while. Maybe you've heard screaming down the hall. Wreck makes you believe anything is possible inside the confines of this apartment building, and the lockdown protocol is so believable it might just make you want to live in a house. You should absolutely give this movie a watch and let us know your thoughts below, because this one is a personal favorite of mine and I will not stop talking about it.
How about we kick off today with a demonic piñata shop? I know, sounds very Five Nights at Freddy's. Bear with me here. Mario Landa, the owner of said party shop, was terrorized by a demon after it became attached to a particular one in his store. At first, the haunted piñata would be on the floor in the morning when Mario arrived to open the shop, and then workers started finding it in other places, so the shop was outfitted with security cameras to solve the mystery. Late one night, the cameras captured a bizarre clown face with scraggly hair and dark eyes, big dark ones, rising from a pile of piñatas. Another night, a piñata was captured as it spun out of control. Something demonic was inhabiting the store. Now, in one of the clips, you can see what appears to be a ghost, or the presence of a being, that throws a piñata, like just chucks it. Now, this footage was originally uploaded to Facebook, and then the very popular Travel Channel show, Paranormal Caught on Camera, decided it needed to be talked about more and featured it. And I promise you, this won't be the only story from that show that I talk about today. Next up, we have footage from 2020. Okay, before anybody panics, I'm talking about the American news magazine that's been broadcasted on TV since June of like 1978. Not the awful year. Now, if we're talking years, on April 5th of 1991, the show featured a segment that showed an actual Roman Catholic ritual of casting out demons. Videotaped at a nun's home in suburban Palm Beach County, the segment shows an affected girl, referred to only as Gina, as she thrashes under the effect of ancient prayers. What's happening? Well, she's sprinkled with holy water, there's a cross being pressed to her head, and what's she doing? Well, retching, writhing, yowling, baring teeth. Get out of here, me not want to leave. She's shrieking all of that at the priest, as one hand snaps the gauze bonds tying her to the chair. If the exorcism team hadn't tied Gina down, she might have levitated to the ceiling. Now at the time, the March 25th issue of US News and World Report carried no fewer than 5 articles on hell and the devil, citing a poll that 6 out of 10 Americans believed in the netherworld, which is 2% more than in the church heyday of the 1950s. Another poll released in August of the same year said 55% of Americans believe in the devil, 49% in demonic possession. Most Catholic leaders say possession is rare, with Reverend Kenneth Doyle, communications director for the National Conference of Catholic Bishops, stating he's only heard of a handful of exorcisms in the last 40 years. But I think that's just a PR statement. Here's the thing, when churchmen do perform an exorcism, they don't want to talk about it. The main exorcist in any report is only known as Father A, and his face obscured. Sister Lois Schaefer and the Reverend Walton Dockrell of St. Rita Parish near West Palm Beach, who took part in the exorcism that we have the video of today, said through a secretary, no comment. Now, Palm Beach Bishop J. Keith Simmons, who permitted the taping, issued only like a 4-paragraph statement saying the devil really exists. He is powerful and actively at work in the world today, as through the centuries, which echoes Cardinal John O'Connor of New York. Now, it was O'Connor's remark that there can be no question about the reality of the devil that initially drew the interest of the TV show, especially after the church got 75 requests from around the country to investigate possible cases of possession. Who got that sucker of a job? Reverend James Labar, a specialist in the occult, who looked into some of the initial claims and was like, Gina, yeah, you're being tormented by demons. According to the report, she experienced psychotic episodes, visions of demons and dead people. Her mom tried everything. She brought her to hospital, she brought her to specialists. Didn't do anything. Now, at the footage, the priests say the girl was controlled by 10 evil spirits. They meet her violent reactions by following the prayers and gestures of that rite. This whole ordeal to try and banish the demons? 6 hours, which apparently isn't uncommon for exorcism lengths. Now, before the procedure even took place, Father A mentioned how it's a terrifying experience. He could die tomorrow, or be attacked and taken over. Evil spirits like to take their sweet time leaving a body, and not without a fight, and that leaves everybody involved drained, exhausted, and not doing so well in the health department. Also quoted is Dr. Warren Schlanger of the Miami Hospital, where Gina was treated before and after the exorcism, and he's like, yeah, she got better afterwards. Well, after the exorcism, but she was still pretty weak. Father A, he wasn't doing so hot afterwards. He believes the devil is disturbing his sleep because it wants to weaken and destroy him, which he just considers that the price he has to pay as the church's point man against demons. Now, the footage that we have today, the church actually tried taking it down because they don't want it to be public anymore. But don't worry, folks, I got you. I think it's time for me to talk about my favorite creepy demonic doll, Annabelle. So back when I was in high school, I actually got to portray her, local haunted house, whole thing. What we're talking about today, the folks over at the Overnight YouTube channel were granted permission to stay overnight in Ed and Lorraine Warren's museum, which is unheard of. But thankfully for us, they captured their experience on a variety of recording devices, making a very long series going in depth that I totally recommend watching. But if you don't feel like spending a couple of hours doing so, don't worry, that's what I'm here for. So one thing I'd like to point out is how Annabelle decided to mess around on camera. I think if we're looking at timestamps, it was 58:29. Her eyes are pretty small, and they move a little bit, which she's a rag doll, that's not supposed to happen. But then at 58:52, when the camera is panned back to her, her eyes are back to normal, and like double the size in comparison to the first time slot. Now, when user Mason8363 mentioned this in the comment section, I thought it had to be like a trick of the light or something, so I went back and I took some screenshots on my phone. And what do you know, I didn't need them. I could tell clear as day that Annabelle's eyes had grown. And once again, folks, that's not supposed to happen. Now, if you're like, okay, who's Annabelle? What's going on with this? Why is she demonic? Don't worry. I know the story off by heart pretty much. The real story, that is, not the Hollywood movie, which we love. Donna and Angie were student nurses, good friends, sat at a room together while in school, and for Donna's 28th birthday, her mom gifted her a very large Raggedy Ann doll. And she was thrilled, which, like, so would I be. Give me dolls any day. Soon after adopting the precious doll, Donna started to notice some weird behavior and weirdness going on in the apartment. She would leave Annabelle in her bed every morning behind her locked bedroom door, seating her the same way with her arms and legs crossed, and would come home at night to Annabelle having moved rooms and in positions that weren't possible. She's described a few instances of the doll kneeling, and once again, stuffed dolls can't kneel. They don't have the joints for that. Donna and Angie then started finding notes left throughout the apartment written on parchment paper and red pen, which they didn't own parchment paper or red pens. When Donna's boyfriend Lou started criticizing the doll, because guys, dolls, stereotypes, unexplainable handprints and scratches began appearing on his body. And that's when the girls were like, okay, we need a priest. And then the priest brought in the Warrens. Before that, they had brought in a medium who had told them that there was a ghost attached to the doll, Annabelle Higgins. Turns out that was false, Ed came in and was like, that's a demon. So he got the doll out, calmed it down, brought it home. Not without its trials and tribulations though. Annabelle's gotten up to some stuff over the years. And ever since, she's been one of the many demonic items that live in the museum. I can't even imagine what kind of a hotbed that place is, because Ed and Lorraine had the common sense to keep demonic items from being released back into the world. But now that they've passed away, I can't say the same about their son-in-law, Tony Sparrow. He seems like he's doing anything for a quick buck and sensationalism, and that's not safe. So when you're a 911 dispatcher and things go weird, who do you call? Because you can't call Ghostbusters and, well, you're the emergency services. This video comes from a dispatcher who was alone in her office and she heard some knocking. This comes from a dispatcher who was alone in the office one night when she heard some knocking, some other strange sounds, and she saw some really weird shadows. She recorded the activity with her phone over the course of like a week. One night, as she stared down the hallway, she saw a tall, dark figure leaning out of the break room and looking towards her. And as she screamed, it ducked into the room. The dispatcher slammed the door shut, called for police to check the building, and there was nobody there. So yes, this was another video that was showcased on Paranormal Con on camera, and it took me a while to validate this one. When I was watching it, I was like, okay, we got nothing. I was about to click off, and then I saw the mysterious figure in the doorway. And I was like, okay, maybe it's just a lighting trick. And then I realized, I'm like, oh no, this is not a lighting trick. This is not something anybody would want to fake. This is terrifying. Absolutely not. Let's start off today with a cryptid and work our way up to the big guys. So a YouTuber uploaded a video that was apparently filmed on September 26th or 27th of 2013 in the woods around Montreal, Quebec, Canada. In the video, an unidentified man films himself walking through the forest at night. Now, we're not sure why he does that, and also the original video has since been taken down, which might have had context. I'm pretty sure he's looking for something. Now it's just part of these compilations. Eventually, he comes upon something that frightens him, and after exclaiming, "Oh," can't say that word, "Oh God," he immediately turns and begins running in the other direction. Given how dark the footage is, it's not entirely clear what he saw until you slow down the video and you zoom in. Further ahead on the trail, something appears to peek out briefly from a tree before returning to its original position behind said tree. The creature does not appear to be any type of known animal. Rather, it's pale, fish-faced, and with seemingly large eyes. It looks almost like a gray alien type. Look, this video is the real deal, and also if you think about it, it's got a very authentic feel to it. The reaction upon seeing the creature, like, this guy's genuinely startled. He's not rehearsed. I can tell I'm an actor. Now, one of my first thoughts when I saw this footage was like, oh, this cryptid, it's a hide behind, seeing as it ducks really fast. It's a nocturnal critter from American folklore that preys upon humans that wander the woods. It was blamed for the disappearances of early loggers when they failed to return to camp. And as the name suggests, it's able to conceal itself. When you look directly at it, it hides, ducks away. Look, it makes sense to me. You let me know in the comments what you think. As promised, it's UFO time. Alright, I'll be the first to admit we don't know as much about this footage as some of the other entries today, so bear with me. I found this video on Reddit, and while the site does tend to be the Wild West for finding credible information, I think my nonsense filter is pretty decent. So a while ago, user CuriousAD5774 said, "Don't got much to say about this video, other than when my dad originally sent it to me, I felt like it had to be a UFO and there's nothing else that seemed to explain it." Now, Canada is notorious for sightings. I've seen a couple of them, and look, this video was taken way before drones were being used regularly. He thinks it's about 10 years old. So let's break down the video together, shall we? While watching the video, you can see a number of different orbs in a dark sky, and the way they move cannot be explained by science. Now, another commenter, Death Perception, has an idea of what it could be. He's like, yeah, this is pretty good footage, it's dark, it's an old video, but if we're all assuming it's real, pretty sure it is, then it's clearly the typical black triangle that's been seen since at least the 90s. Now somebody else, only capital 5393, was able to relate to the footage, saying it was exactly what their brother and mother described back in the 90s. They were driving in New Hampshire in the wee hours of the morning, going south, and this UFO came and followed them for a while on the highway. There was nobody else around, and it was just like, hanging out, whee, here we go. The lights are exactly what they described though, how they kind of spin in a circle around the center light. And the commenter had never seen anything like they described until that moment. Now, you would have loved to have sent it to the mother and brother, but sadly they passed away. And if we want to talk about how credible the mom was as a witness, she was an Air Force flight nurse during Vietnam. If she hadn't seen it, come on. She had heard rumors about UFOs being real, by the way, and that made her pretty interested in the subject. She actually became like a UFOologist. She joined a lot of organizations, and at one meeting, she sat at the same table with Betty Hill. Time to fulfill another promise, and that's evidence of Bigfoot. Paul Freeman claims that while working as a watershed patroller for the US Forest Service back in 1982, he encountered a Sasquatch, or Bigfoot, near Walla Walla, Washington. Now, him being a whistleblower and talking about knowing about Bigfoot brought him a lot of criticism and disrupted his family's life, causing him to quit the job and relocate. But he returned to the area in 1984 and devoted the rest of his life to a search for evidence. He collected hair, photographs, and a wide variety of casts of footprints and other body parts. Now, in 1992, he followed a series of tracks near Dybbuk Creek and got a close-up video. I'm also pretty sure some of the footage is from 1994, which was when he captured video near the Blue Mountains region of northeastern Oregon. Now, the recordings are considered authentic by quite a few Bigfoot investigators, but sadly for us, a lot of the resolution is too low to be considered conclusive. But I'm pretty sure these videos hold credibility. Could they have been hoaxed? Sure. But I have too many doubts for it to be a fake. And also, the videos offer the possibility that these creatures have supernatural abilities. Now, if you're asking, yo, Alexa, who's this Paul Freeman guy? And why do you think these videos are so credible? Allow me. He was an American Bigfoot hunter, and he discovered a lot of tracks showing dermal ridges. And the plaster casts he made were convincing enough to be considered critical pieces of evidence by anthropologists. Now, if we're talking about which anthropologists, Jeff Meldrum of Idaho State University and Grover Krantz of Washington State University, they put a lot of time and resources into studying them, and it's hard to get resources to study things that aren't credible. Now, sadly, Paul passed away in 2003, but he was adamant until the day he died that what he saw was real proof that Bigfoot is out there. On Saturday, March 11th of last year, William Church, a professional truck driver who regularly drove on Arizona State Route 87, noticed a bright glare in his dash cam, and he thinks the flashing figure is a ghost. Now, he's described himself as someone who has seen a lot of weird stuff during his travels, but he's been able to make sense or explain away everything, except for this video. The specter was spotted at around 2:30 in the morning while William drove past the highway's 200-mile marker, which is located between Phoenix and Payson, Arizona. And since it was that very ungodly hour, there was nobody on the road, and he captured something weird on his Nextcar dash cam, which I guess is a leading dash cam brand. And thankfully, we've got the footage. Granted, it's only 6 seconds long, so pay attention now. And now that we're back, I shall continue. He is positive the translucent figure y'all just saw looks like a person standing in the roadway, saying he can see the lines through the legs that make up the figure. So if we want to give a little context on the area, Arizona State Route 87 is a north to south highway that was constructed in 1927 and measures approximately 272.66 miles. The north end travels to State Route 264 near Second Mesa, a census designated place in Arizona, while the south end travels to Interstate 10 near Picacho, an unincorporated community and another census designated place. Now, a lot of fatal accidents have happened on this 96-year-old highway, which has reportedly led some locals to believe that the road could be haunted. Look, a recent fatal car crash happened on State 87 near milepost 201 in February of last year, and last I checked, the exact cause of the crash is unknown. The two-person collision resulted in the death of one person near Bush Highway, which is east of Fountain Hills, and Valley Chevy dealers in Phoenix named State Route 87 one of Arizona's most dangerous roads. So, if you watch this video that we're talking about today, yeah, there's a lot of supernatural activity on these highways. Because why? Well, people die, spirits don't move on. And look, I'm speaking as somebody who drives, has a license. I don't want to see any ghosts when I'm driving tonight. No thank you. And how about we end today with some 2016 killer clown footage. Now, I'm friends with a lot of creepy clowns. I've been one myself. But 2016 was a rough year to be a clown. The 2016 clown sighting incidents were reported in the United States, Canada, Australia, and a lot of other countries and territories in August of that year. They were first reported in Green Bay, Wisconsin, in what turned out to be a marketing stunt for a horror film, but the phenomenon later spread to many other cities in the US. And by mid-October, clown sightings and attacks have been reported in nearly all of the US states, 9 out of 13 provinces and territories of Canada, and 18 other countries. Alright. Watch the video now before I start fuming over clown rights, and we can break it down after. So this footage shows the masked monster emerging from a motorway underpass and standing in the middle of the road, waving very creepily at the stopped car. Now when the figure starts walking towards the vehicle, the male driver tries to reverse away, but then the crazed clown makes a sudden dash towards the family in the car. And these guys were just trying to come home from a nice dinner out. After backing up far enough, the panicked driver puts his foot down and speeds towards the clown, who jumps out of the road a split second before being mowed down clown by the car. Now, the driver who put his foot down and sped towards the clown, it's terrifying. In the original Facebook post, the wife of the driver wrote that the incident took place at Grange Mill Lane, and they were confronted by this person coming out from the underpath tunnel and charging at them. I don't know what to make of it. Like, as much as I love a good killer clown, such as one of my besties, Buttons, there's a reason they only exist in controlled fictional situations. And like this, if I ever saw a killer clown when I'm driving, absolutely not.